Hello and welcome to the Quick Game Podcast. I'm Hayden Ellis, joined by Jarrett Stidham. We're blessed to be joined by fellow Auburn alum, ESPN analyst Cole Cubelic. Cole, thanks for joining the show, dude.
No, man, I appreciate you guys having me. Is this, did we name the pod Quick Game because that's all Stidham can throw?
Oh, that's actually great. That's actually really great. We were actually,
Besides me, go ahead, Jay.
we kind of went back and forth on a couple names. One of them was, at least at my time at Auburn, the staple, the muddle huddle. So we threw that around a little bit. And then Hayden was the one that came up with the Quick Game podcast. He never really told me exactly why he thought of that, but that might be a good point.
If we can ever get Chandler Cox to do a podcast and name it after whatever his little sticks out.
The Cox Cat.
Yeah,
the Cox Cat.
He's got to get that thing going.
That's funny.
That would be just, yeah. Besides me butchering your name on the intro to the show, you coming back with that response was the best intro to the show that it's had.
There you
bar
go.
None.
I'll take it. Absolutely.
Yeah. But thanks for being here, dude. I know we were just talking before we got live that you have a crazy schedule right now. You said you got up at 3:30, 3:50 Sunday morning, and now we're just rolling. Got the kids. Yeah.
Well, it's the Columbia, Missouri is just tough, man. It's like you either go Kansas City or St. Louis, and it's an hour and a half drive, 2 hours if you go Kansas City, and then I think I had a 7:10 flight. So we got back to the hotel about 11:15, and then you got a 7:50 flight, hour and a half drive. The rental car place is not on site, so you got to drop it off and shuttle over. It's a lot, man.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it's about like College Station. There's no real easy way to get
that's
in
true.
That's tough to get to.
Yeah.
What time are you and GMAC starting the shows on Monday morning?
7 a.m.
Yeah.
I had a buddy,
right back at
one of my buddies, a good friend of mine lived in New York, lives in Dallas now. He was driving through yesterday, and so we went and picked up some dinner. He came by the house, and I left my keys in his car, and he left last night to start heading towards Dallas. So yeah, I didn't have keys in the car this morning, so I did the show from home. But hey, it's about an extra 20 minutes of sleep, so that was good.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
A little work from home action. Love it.
Make it happen. You make it happen either way.
Cool. Well, we're pumped you're here. It's going to be a great one, I think. Has the potential to be our best episode yet. Should be entertaining. We are going to talk mostly Auburn today, naturally. I would like to say this is not a strictly Auburn football podcast because I get a lot of crap from friends and previous coworkers all you do is talk Auburn, whatever. Okay, we didn't set out to just do that. But the turmoil and maybe anarchy, I would say, of Auburn football always, and especially this season, kind of just demands it. It's just easy to talk about.
Hold on. You got college football fans that are mad at you about what you're talking about? Never.
Not college football fans.
I grew up in Sylacauga, Alabama. So, out outside of Auburn, half of my friends are Auburn, half Bama. And so all my Bama friends are like, your podcast is just Auburn, whatever. And so, but the further I get into doing this, I realize and I empathize with you and GMAC. Just when you cover games, you have Alabama fans who think you are hate Alabama, and then you have Auburn fans who think you hate Auburn. They say Greg McElroy is an Alabama apologist, and then you also have Auburn fans who think he just praises Bama over and over. And the fact that you have both ends of the spectrum means you're probably doing a decent job.
I think the best thing that we saw last year, McElroy did the Tennessee-Alabama game, and I took a screenshot of it. There were two tweets on my timeline that were above one another, and one was an Alabama fan saying how bad McElroy was because he hated Alabama and obviously loved Tennessee, and under it was a Tennessee fan saying how great McElroy was because he was so nice to Tennessee, and I'm just like, there you go, that's it. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Yeah, it's you're not going to make them happy, and that's, I think we all get to a point where we understand that. Listen, Greg wants Alabama to win every game, and he should. I want Auburn to win every game. I should. But we also have an understanding that we're probably not going to get too far in our chosen profession if all we do is talk about how great, our alma maters are. So it's we both like to be fair. We both like to call it how we see it, and there's a lot of people that don't like that a lot of time. But I don't really know another way to do it. And so, it took me a long time where all fans hated me because I told people what I thought and just called kind of what I saw. And, we've grown a little bit to where, only about, I think maybe 30 or 40% of the Auburn fan base hates me now because I don't pick them to win every game by 40. So we're moving up the ladder. We're gaining momentum here slowly but surely.
One day at a time. One day they'll appreciate you for just being fair. That's the golden age will be when that happens, right?
Never.
Well, kind of going into that, Cole, for the people that that listen to the show, and and quite frankly, even for myself, because I don't know the whole your whole background, and I think you offer a unique perspective, given your role within ESPN and on the radio and those sorts of things, from your time playing at Auburn. What was your career like, once you got done playing and then transitioning into the media role? And because like I said, it's really unique that there's some people, and this is my issue with some people, or a lot of people in the media, is that there's no credibility sometimes, and you're able to sit there, you and Greg, like we're talking, is you guys have been there, done that. You guys have played, big time football. And now you're in the media and able to, offer that perspective. Kind of go through, when you started, got done playing and then to where you are now.
It's Jared, it's a long journey and it's a long story, but I'll try to kind of keep it brief. When I got out of school, honestly, I wanted to do sports talk radio. And, when I finished at Auburn, there weren't 4 dedicated websites to every school. There weren't
Right.
7 million podcasts. You couldn't go on YouTube and do a show. You had your 1 or 2 local sports radio shows. You had your 3 or 4 guys from your local TV networks that were sports people on the weekends. And then you had your 4 or 5 television crews, and they were all, ESPN, ABC, Jefferson Pilot, nobody, those were almost unattainable when I got out of school.
Mm-hmm.
There was no part of me that ever said, "Oh, I'll call games on ESPN one day." It just wasn't a real thing. And so it was the desire to do it was there, but there was no avenue towards it. And so I was tired of being broke. And so I called my aunt, who was in pharmaceutical sales, and I said, because her husband was in medical sales, so they had a pretty good life. And I was just like, how do I do what you do? Because you guys live well, and you've told me good things about your job. And she's like, all right, let's start working on it. So she helped me put resumes together. She helped me find out places to go interview for jobs, what to say, how to say it. She kind of got me prepared. And there was a company called Santa Fe Labo that was expanding. And they posted these interview sessions in Birmingham, and I went. And the guy that was screening people was an Auburn fan. And so he kind of pushed me through. And then the next round of interviews was the next day, instead of in a ballroom, it was in an actual, a suite. And you sat down with 2 other guys. One was an Ole Miss fan and one was an Auburn fan. They asked me questions for about 10 minutes, and then we started talking football. And we talked football for an hour. And the guy's like, well, we're going to push you through the next round because you obviously can have conversations. And this is basically what it's going to be like in your doctor's offices anyway. So let's try the next round. And so that thing kind of went through, and I ended up getting the job. And it was great. I was very fortunate to get it. My only sales experience was selling sneakers at the mall in high school. So at least I did have some sales experience, I guess. But it's that's when I tell people, this is kind of sidebar, but we talk about NIL and all this crazy stuff, and I always talk about the power of the platform that's provided. So a college football player at a place like Auburn or Tennessee or Florida or Texas or Notre Dame or Ohio State. I got that job because I played football at Auburn. Now, no one handed it to me, but I don't get the opportunity to potentially get it if I don't play football at Auburn. Same thing with SEC Network, same thing with Jocks here in Birmingham and the other stations I've worked for. It's just, I tell people, playing football at Auburn has provided pretty much every penny that I've made my entire life for different reasons. And it wasn't like one alumni just said, oh, that guy was such a good player, we're going to take care of him and let him do nothing but get paid. It wasn't like that. It's just that those doors wouldn't have opened if there wouldn't have been Auburn football.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
That part was big for kind of me moving forward. And so I did that for a couple of years. And my first year out, my dad's favorite word growing up was networking. And I used to hate it. And I used to hate him for talking to me about it because he would say, hey, come meet this guy. Come meet that guy. You got to meet this guy. He does this. Or this guy runs this business. You need to talk to him. Or he's the guy who does this and this. And I was just like, please, I don't want to meet these people. Who cares what they do? I don't like these people. Why are you introducing them to me? And there was a guy, and now I've come full circle, and I realize that's literally the most important thing on planet Earth for any job,
That's right.
any field. Like, it doesn't matter. And so there was a guy named Steve Shelton in Huntsville, Alabama, where I was working, that my dad had introduced me to. And I remember he owned this cluster of radio stations, and I would pass the building where all the radio stations were housed almost every day when I would go call in all these offices. And I knew one of the stations carried Auburn football. So I was like, screw it. And I just pulled in the parking lot one day. I walked in. I said, is Steve Shelton here? And the lady's like, he's upstairs. Do you have an appointment? I said, no, but can you tell him that Cole Cubelic, Tom's son, is here? And, I hear him buzzing, whatever. And he's like, send him up, send him up. And so I go up there, and I was like, we talked for a while, just kind of BS. And I said, hey, the reason I came by is I said, you carry Auburn football. I said, why don't you give me and Ben Leard, who was living in Decatur at the time, which is like 20 minutes, west. I said, why don't you give us a pregame show? We played last year. We know the team better than anybody. Put us on before like the actual pregame show. And I learned my most important lesson in radio right then and there. He said, cool, that sounds great. If you can sell it, you can have it. And what he meant was, if you can sell advertising and get some dollars on it, we'll put it on the air. And that's pretty much Radio 101 right there. And so we went out, we got like 4 or 5 sponsors, a couple $100 a piece, and they gave it to us. It was a 30-minute show with commercials. So I think it was 17 minutes of content.
Yeah.
And we went in there and recorded the first one. And I remember calling my mom on the way home, and I said, Mom, that's where I belong. That's where I need to be. I need to be behind the microphone. I need to be talking about football. I loved it. And she was like, that's great. But whatever you do, don't quit your day job. Figure out how to make it work, but keep your day job. And that was critical advice at the time, because I would have thought, oh, I got to go do this, and this is what I want to be. Well, that would turn into moving the show down to Auburn and expanding it to an hour. And then Ben moved to Auburn, so had more connections down there. I was going down there to do it. And then I met John Cole, who ran the Auburn Network. Stan White moved over to do the actual radio broadcast, which left the TV replays for CSS, which is, some of the stuff that I say when I talk to kids about it today, they've never even heard of this. Like CSS was a
I remember
TV station
CSS.
back in the day. They showed all the replays for like Georgia, Auburn, Tennessee. And so he asked me if I wanted to do that. So I started doing that. Well, then he asked me to do the spring game. So I did that. And they had pay-per-view games back then. That was a real thing. I think Oklahoma's the only team that does pay-per-view games anymore. And so that turned into ESPN started gobbling up the inventory, and those went away. And there was a guy at CSS. He goes, hey, I've got a Sunbelt package. Do you want it? And so we were down to doing about 2 or 3 TV games a year, as opposed to when we started, we were doing like 7 to 9. And I said, I got to take this because, you guys know football. It's the same thing as football. Like, if I ever want to do this, I need reps. I need to do 15, 20 of these a year. I can't be doing 2 or 3 and never really get anywhere. I said, I'll take it. I want to do it. I want to get reps. And so I remember some people at Auburn were really pissed off. And they were just like, how could you leave doing Auburn games to go do, Troy and Louisiana Lafayette? And I was just like, I don't care what teams it is. I just need to be doing it. And so I moved over, started doing it. I did that for 3 years. It's kind of crazy because I did it with Joe Davis, who is now the #1 Major League guy, and he like the #2 NFL play-by-play guy on Fox. He's going to do the World Series this year. He's incredible. Joe Block did it with me year 2. He does Pirates TV and radio. And Tom Dorr did it with me year 3. Tom's retired, but Tom called 3 Bulls championships on WGN in Chicago when they had Bulls games. He played basketball at Purdue. So it's just wild, man. That like I met all these people, and like Sandra Golden did sideline one year. She does radio in Atlanta. She's super cool. And it was just awesome networking. And like actually I got great experience doing it. And so then I fell in love with it. And I'm like, I got to do this. I got to make this happen. Fast forward, a lot of bullshit, a lot of begging, a lot of emails, a lot of asking, a lot of meeting people. Like there was one time when SEC Network started, I wasn't on the radar. And it was like Booger McFarland, Laura Rutledge, Maria Taylor, Marcus Spears. I'm like, yeah, they don't even know who I am. And I was doing radio in Huntsville, and I was doing these CSS games, and I was calling people. And Stephanie Drewley was hosting like this town hall with Joe Tessitore and Bo Jackson in Auburn. And it was like to announce the SEC Network. And I told my wife, I was like, we got to go to Auburn tonight. It's a Friday. She's like, what for? And I told her this thing was happening. And she's like, oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, we'll spend the night. We'll go to dinner, whatever. So we go down there and we sit through the thing, and it's like 15 minutes. And they're done. And we walk to the back. And Kirk Sampson's like helping me get to the back. And he's like, you should be able to stand here and find Stephanie when it's over. And we wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. Like she never comes through there. We never even see her. And my wife's like, hold on, did you bring me down here just to try to meet Stephanie Drewley? And I was like, well, yeah, she runs the SEC network. So I got to try to get in front of her and tell her I want to do this. And she's like, so you didn't care about what they did. You just wanted to meet her? And I was like, that's the only reason we're here. Now let's go get something to eat because we didn't get to see her. So, but I had a guy named Bo Kerr who went to Auburn with me. He worked for ESPN Regional here in Birmingham. He's like the associate AD at Samford now. And he's like, listen, I talked to him about it one day. He's like, you got to call these guys, start sending them stuff because I think you can do this. He was very helpful. I had a ton of people help me along the way. The one thing that's cool about media is like everybody's usually willing to help everybody because we know how hard it is to actually gain any real traction. So I've got a laundry list of people that I'm very thankful to. I had an audition down the road. Stephanie Drewley set it up to get in studio. They hired 4 people. I was 5 on a list of 4. I didn't get it. And then I met Steve Ackles after that at SEC Media Days. And he's like, listen, I thought they were going to use you. I'm going to put you on some games because I think you do a good job. Next year I did like 7 games. The next year I did like 12 games. And then I got on a regular crew the 3rd year. And this is Jordan, Tom, and I's, I think 6th year, maybe, 6th year together. So that's kind of how it all happened, man. It was just, and there's a lot in between all of that, but very long story, very short of kind of how I got here. It was not the traditional, hey, I'm a former Auburn player. Let's give him a tryout and put him on the SEC network. Like that is not how my journey went at all.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a bunch of people on here, whether it's, media, sports, and it's so funny that they get to their position now and it seems like it happened overnight, but you good and well know that it takes years and years of those reps, getting practice, doing it right until you finally get that one chance of getting your foot really in the door and your career can explode. All my buddies that are still in personnel and coaching, it's just like it can happen in a split second. Like Billy High.
No different. It's no different in coaching, man. Like some of these guys, they were a high school offensive coordinator 2 years ago, and now they're like the head coach of a Group of 5 team or a Power 5 coordinator. And like some of these guys have been, position coach for 30 years. And like it's just so much of it's timing in almost everything. But it makes me appreciate what I have. Like, being a part of a great crew, doing games. I'm calling games every Saturday. Like, yeah, it's exhausting, but I love it. Like I tell people, I haven't worked in like 7 years. So, because everything that goes into it, like you guys know, like I love watching film. If I didn't have 3 kids, I'd probably watch like 12 hours of film a day. Like I love every bit of it. Like I love seeing what people are doing, and I love seeing how certain guys play and like what's different and what's not. And I love finding guys that nobody knows about that can play and like trying to tell people about them. Like I love looking at numbers and looking at stats and trying to think about what's going to happen in certain places. So it's the whole process to me is not work. I enjoy it. I enjoy doing prep for my radio show because I learn. I enjoy lining up interviews because I want to, certain people that I want to talk to. None of it is really work. It's not a chore. And then the fact that I worked at, it's this podunk radio station in Huntsville that I knew nobody was listening to. It was a startup. I did, like I said, CSS games. That we used to have this deal. The best radio show I ever did was on this startup radio station in Huntsville with a buddy of mine, Matt Mitchell. His name Cassio Kid. He's a comedian by trade, but he's a sports fan. We did an amazing show. And it was just bad timing, again, because the station was awful and they just didn't know what they were doing. And like we had this running joke that I would say certain things in a broadcast when we were doing CSS games just to see if anyone would tweet about it or say anything about it. And like we would come back on Monday and we would have like the tweet that I sent out about it, and there would be like 3 people that responded, and they were all listeners to our show. It's like the only reason they were watching is because we were talking about it on the show, and they went to see what we were going to do. So it's like doing all that stuff just makes you appreciate where you are that much more.
No doubt.
That's good stuff. And now look at you. You're big time. I love what you said about I love what you said about it's not work. That's when people ask me do I miss sports, like that's what I miss the most is the actual work. game planning, doing little stuff,
Yep.
watching the tape, watching the kids we recruited get better. How can you get a guy to go from here to here in a year? And those types of things are just fun to do. So I relate to that a lot. Kind of what I want to cover is just recap Auburn-LSU, what happened this past Saturday. Just talk about the offense and everything about the game. Maybe talk about Bryan Harsin's future for a little bit. Where does the administration sit? Put on our administration hats for a little bit. And then into the show, talk the landscape of the SEC in its entirety and debate, is the East better than the West? So should be exciting. Let's get into it. What did Auburn and LSU play out the way you expected it to, Cole?
No, definitely not. If you'd have told me Robbie Ashford was going to pass for 384, I mean, I'd have taken whatever wager you wanted on that one.
No doubt.
No question.
And I damn sure didn't think they would run the ball. They didn't have a ton of success running the football, but I mean, that LSU's D-line is legit, and that's without Mason Smith, who got hurt in the first week. But Jaquelin Roy, B.J. Ozari, Ali Gay, the dudes can play. And then now they got Harold Perkins at linebacker who's busting out, and they got a good core linebacker group. Their safeties fly up and play the run. Like Jay Ward comes up and plays the run really well. It's just they're not going to run the ball. And they don't have a lot of receivers who can separate. They don't have that eraser. They don't have that 50-50 guy that you just know, all right, if I get in the jam, let's lob it up to this kid, and he'll probably make a play and can get me out of jail. Like that's just, they don't have that guy either. So Tank is kind of the guy, and if that's what you're going to sort of build everything around, it didn't look like a very good matchup. Now, I thought defensively Auburn could get some wins because Derek's having a great year out on the edge. Michael Leota can play. You know, they got some interior guys that can play, even though they hadn't been playing great inside. And, you know, you got two freshman tackles that were starting. LSU's been tinkering with the offensive line, a quarterback that likes to leave the pocket early, doesn't necessarily get through his progressions. So even though they got good receivers and pretty good backs, I'm kind of like, the defense, I think, could be problematic and can probably get in the backfield. And even if Jaden Daniels breaks them down with his legs a few times, that could be okay as long as they're not hitting explosives down the field. So, I mean, I kind of figured LSU would win the game, but I didn't think Auburn would have the success that they did on offense. Now, you say success, but then when you turn it over 4 times, obviously that negates just about any success that you have. You can't win games doing that. So, you know, the frustrating part for me is, and we had people call our show this morning. I had people texting me during the game, which I'm working. I love when I'm working a game.
Yeah, you're not watching.
You know, they're like, "Oh, I can't believe I can't believe they just did this." I'm like, "Buddy, I'm standing on the sideline. It's 5 minutes left in the third quarter. Like, I have no idea what you're talking about." But I had people on Sunday, and it's like this reoccurring theme. People tweeting me of, "Oh, they got so cute. Why'd they get so cute? Why'd they try to get tricky and this and that?" And it's
you have to. You have to.
It's like, I mean, I went off on it on our show today, and I was pretty frustrated. And I don't think people understand that when you don't have a foundation of your offense that you can consistently turn to, there's really nowhere to go. And I mean, like, you guys know this, and Jarrett knows this better than anybody because he constructs game plans and runs offenses most of his life. And if you don't have those 2 or 3 things that you know, all right, when we get in the jam, we're just going to go back to the stretch play, or we're going to go back to our screen game, or I know if we get one-on-ones in this game, you know, if it's 20 shot plays in this game, we're going to get it and we're going to throw them because we're probably going to win 6 or 7 of those, and that could be the difference in the game. They don't have that. They want it to be the stretch play, and then if the stretch play was going, then you can build your counter off that. You can build your bootleg off that. You can build your heavy play actions off that. There's a lot of, you know, you can start locking the backside and hitting an ISO, maybe run duo off of it. Like, there's a lot of things you can build off that. They don't have the foundation that's consistent to build all these other things on. And I think fans just think you put in all these plays every week and then they just work. And it's like, no.
Yeah, you just go run it.
You run your foundational plays through camp. You install what you're going to run throughout the course of the year. And then you have your attachments that you add and subtract by whoever your opponent is week after week after week. And to not have a foundation, there's really nowhere else to go than try new things and try to be creative and try to make things happen in a different way. Now, do I think that they ran Robbie the way that they needed to? No, I don't, because I think he's a north-south runner. And that doesn't mean that he's Cam Newton and he needs to be running quarterback power between the tackles 20 times a game. But he is a guy that needs to take the ball and go straight. He doesn't need to be going
Right.
east and west because he gets in trouble when he does that. So could they build some things in from that perspective? Yeah, of course they could. Does Tank need the ball more than 12 times or 9 times a game? Absolutely he does. But,
Right.
I mean, I watched the Missouri game, and they run stretch play on the first play, and the right guard gets knocked down like he's in a damn pro wrestling match, and he's trying to sell some dude, give him a shoulder off the ropes. And it's like, where do you go from there? Like, I don't. And then the people want to say, well, you know, it's Harsin's job to recruit. Why didn't he get better talent? Well, have you not been paying attention to the entire offseason as to what the administration's been doing behind the scenes? Like, the guy's on the brink of getting fired. You cannot recruit with that. Like, it's not real in this day. I mean, you have coaches now who are going to the administration after winning 7 games and saying, hey, man, if I don't have a 5 or an 8-year deal, they're going to negatively recruit me, and I'm not going to be able to get anybody. And these dudes are getting extensions. Like, you got coordinators at Tennessee, no problem with them, that are making 1.4 and 1.2. Their defense was 99th in the nation last year. They won 7 football games last year, and they just bumped them up to 1.4 and 1.2. No one's trying to steal your coordinators, man. They're not. But they're able to go to them and say, we had a little bit of success, and Georgia's negatively recruiting us because they think we're going to be gone or they think we're going to lose our coordinators. Like, we need you to help us out. And these ADs fall for it, man. They fall for it hook, line, and sinker. So there's just so much working against Harsin and that staff. Has he made some bad hires? Probably. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't sit there and tell you that. Did he have a couple of guys forced on him? Possibly. Did he hire some guys because of their background and think that it was something that he needed? Yeah, sure. But I think he tried to correct it in the offseason, and now he's just in an almost impossible situation. So to me, it's frustrating to hear what people get mad about, why people get mad. I mean, we had people after the Penn State game saying, that's it, it's over, it's done. He's got to go now. I was like, guys, they're 3-1. Like, after the Missouri game, they're 3-1, and people were saying he's got to go, it's over, it's it, you're done. Like, 3-1. Like, in what era are we living that 3-1 is you got to get a guy out? I don't process that. Like, to me, it's still about winning and losing games. And if it gets ugly and they lose a few more games and they want to go that direction, fine, go that direction. But, you know, I got people that are DMing me and calling our show today saying, you know, he's lost all support. Nobody in that stadium supported him. And I'm like, listen, bro, as far as I'm concerned, the head coach coaches the players and runs the team. If you don't support the head coach, you don't support the players, you don't support the team. Like, that's the way it works. You're totally entitled to think somebody could do a better job. Or you might not like a guy and think that somebody else would be better. But if you say, I'm giving up all of my support to the guy, to me, that means you give up support of the team because he's still the head coach of the team. And that's why I don't play, and Greg won't do it either. We don't play the game of, well, who's going to be next, or who are they going to go get, or, you know, who's a good fit. They have a head coach. So we're not doing that until the time comes to actually have that conversation.
A lot to unpack there. That was a great overall analysis. You touched everything. No, it was fantastic. A couple of things I'd like to break down a little further.
No, let me just add this. So then we get the people who say, you know, preparation makes performance, whatever that quote is. Like, so you're telling me that Bryan Harsin prepared for fumbled zone read mesh? You're telling me Bryan Harsin prepared for Coy Moore throwing a hook shot to a linebacker interception? Like, there can't be people who really believe that. But there are people who say that with conviction, and so I'm assuming that they believe that. Like, I can't.
Yep.
You're telling me there's an offensive coordinator in Eric Keesaw that prepares for a quarterback to run sideways and take a sack? Like, that's, people can't think that way. Like, but those are the things that I can't process. So
I know.
Here we are.
I truly have started to feel empathetic for Auburn's offensive coaches, because you do have one of the most talented and best backs in the country in Tank Bigsby, and you hear, oh, they just need to quit getting cute, like you said, and give Tank the football. All right, I think Tank has one of the worst percentages of yards gained before contact in the entire country of running backs, and one of the best yards after contact of any running back in the country. So what does that mean? That means you have maybe the worst offensive line and maybe the best running back. And so, okay, what did he have? 12 carries for like 50 yards or something, maybe less than that.
I think I charted the Missouri game, and I think he had 19 carries, and I think 17 of those he was hit at or before the line of scrimmage.
Exactly. And
I don't know
so
what you can
the
do
flip
with
side
that,
of that,
man. Like I don't know what you can
nothing,
do with it.
nothing.
You can't.
Especially with a quarterback who is so limited throwing the football. I mean, Auburn's almost all of our explosive plays came off of what? Robbie scrambling to his right, finding somebody downfield, which I thought LSU, granted, they have a lot of players on defense like you discussed. I thought they did a horrible job containing receivers down the field when Robbie scrambled to his right.
Yeah, no, he ad-libbed for multiple explosive plays. Yeah.
Almost all of them. And he had the one throw down the seam, which was nice. Great ball. Other than that, the 3rd and 25, oh my gosh. I think LSU played quarters and just lost Tyler Fromm across the middle of the field and went for 40. Like, it's 3rd and 25, and their safeties are still triggering to the line of scrimmage when you've got 30 yards to pick up to go get a first down. And it's like, you got to be better than that. So,
something that I was sitting here thinking about, and you were talking about it a little bit, is the getting creative part. And I just know this from my own personal experience, whether if it's at Auburn or in the NFL or whatever. And this is where I kind of get puzzled and with Auburn right now. But okay, like whenever I played at Auburn, we knew no matter what, things got kind of sticky throughout the game. We could hand the ball to number 21, Kerryon Johnson. We could run power, and he was going to make yards. And that was kind of our identity on offense. And the next year we kind of had the same thing, And so as an offense, you try to establish your identity through. You can't do it during the spring, obviously. It's too early. You can't really do it during fall camp, and you really start to towards the end of fall camp, the first game or two of the season. That's when you really want to start honing in on, okay, who are we as an offense? Are we more RPO based? Are we more the stretch game? Like you're saying, like some of these things, are we more the quick game on the, passing game? Like, what is it that we do well and we can always go to? And for me, and I don't watch college football nearly as much as you, obviously, Cole. I'm freaking worried about attacking Kansas City's defense next Monday night. But
yeah, good luck going into Kansas City next week, by the way, on Monday Night Football.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Hayden. Thanks for the support. But we're about halfway into the year here, and like you're saying, the thing that just puzzles me is like, what is Auburn's identity? Like you said, we have arguably one of the best backs in the country, and that's really it, And we do have some decent players here and there, but like the quarterback position, we've gone through TJ. We brought in Zach from A&M. He's hurt, and then Robbie transfer in. Like, who? Okay, then that goes back to recruiting. Like, we can only get quarterbacks within the transfer portal, and then like the rest of the offense, I just don't see like what is the identity. And like you said, like Robbie throwing for 380 yards the other night, like I was shocked. And I told Hayden before the show, like I don't care who you are, if you're putting 400 yards up, 400 yards plus of total offense against an LSU defense, like that's good.
Yep.
And you hadn't seen that really at all, and like you said, turnovers killed us. But again, like when things get tight, like what do they do? Where do they go? I just don't feel that, and I don't know if it's a personnel thing. I don't know if it's a schematic thing. Obviously,
Let me tell you, it's a personnel thing. It's a personnel thing. We know what it is. It's a personnel thing.
I mean, yeah. And that could very well be true. But then again, like these coaches are getting paid a lot of money to be creative and come up with things, and like you said, like they're trying to. I just don't see what the identity is or will be, and it's October 3rd, and still got half the season to play.
Yeah, and the most difficult opponents coming up on the schedule.
We got arguably one of the toughest teams in the country this weekend, We got, Bama still coming up. We still, we play the hardest
Ole,
schedule
at
every
Ole
single year.
Miss.
Yeah, we play the hardest schedule in the country every single year.
Jarrett, the other part about that's tough, and even you haven't been out very long, but that's even different now from when you were in school is, the full pad practices, the full contact practices have been diminished even more. So finding that identity, finding out who you are, as everybody knows, you don't really become a good football team until you're actually doing things full speed, especially O-line, D-line. Like,
Right.
it's the only way to figure out who you are. So
No
now,
doubt.
I really believe for a lot of teams, the first, and I don't think people go into it treating it this way, but I think it kind of has to be this way, is that the first 2, 3, 4 games are almost extended practices because you don't know what you have on your hands. You don't know who's going to be able to handle themselves the right way, physically, who's going to be able to hold up, do certain things. And then, you also take into account we're on third center now, and you mentioned it. We've gone through a couple of quarterbacks. So, now Ike Uliota's out. So that's one of your edge defenders that's going to be gone. So you're having to deal with some of that stuff. And listen, I was on a team that went through 6 centers. We only won 3 games that year. So it's not easy. And trying to find guys who can come in there and handle it and do it. Now you're mixing and matches in other positions. So I think too, it hurt by, Robbie was supposed to be a role player this year. Coach Harsin, I had the spring game. He told me at the spring game, like, he's going to play. We're going to have a package for him, but he's not ready to be the quarterback. And they thought Zach and TJ were going to battle it out. That doesn't go according to plan for whatever reason. And, now you got a guy that was supposed to be maybe a red zone quarterback or a changeup to your fastball and your slider. And now he's your main pitch. Like he's what you got to go up to bat, against, Manny Ramirez or Barry Bonds with and see if it holds up. Knowing good and well it's probably not. So the other thing that's changed a lot from when you were in school is, a lot of guys have different identities and different options and different set of, I guess, things that are important to them. And, specifically with that position, there are some guys that need to figure out what they want to do and what they want to be. And that doesn't just solely include when I say that, the transfer portal or playing somewhere else. It's, there are things like brands that are being thrown around these days. There are things like, I've talked to this doesn't have anything to do with Auburn, but, to tell you how different things are, when I played college football a long time ago, and I was redshirted. That was when, you just went in and you knew you were going to get redshirted. I was a developmental guy because I only played defense in high school. And I can remember vividly saying, can I be on kick return? Can I be on extra point field goal? Can I be like a backup D tackle? Can I be the fullback on goal line? Like, what can I do to not redshirt? I don't care how much I play. Like, I just don't want to redshirt. I just want to get like 5 snaps a game, and I'll be happy as a clam. Like, I would love it.
Right.
You got guys now in the last 2 or 3 weeks that are role players on teams, get legit snaps, start on 2 or 3 special teams that are telling their coaches they want to go redshirt because of the 4-game redshirt rule, and they want to save a year, knowing in the back of their mind they're saying, they're telling their coach, I want to come back and compete next year and save a year, but they're really just going to hit the portal. And they think they're going to be more valuable because they have an extra year of eligibility. So, like, those are the kind of things that are happening right now at a lot of places that I just don't think people even think about. So it's, you can't be back and forth. If you want to play, go play. If you don't want to play, don't play. If you're healthy enough to play, get out there and play. If you're not, then don't. So there's more wishy-washiness for a lot of different reasons in college football right now than there ever has been in the history of the game.
It's a tough environment to build a team in general, especially walking into a depleted Auburn program that Bryan Harsin stepped into, and the politics of what happened over the offseason, trying to rebuild, nearly impossible, as you said, a situation that he's encountered. But you look back at last year, Auburn was 6-3 with a huge lead against Mississippi State, in which they end up blowing. Yep. And the season goes downhill. You finish 6-6. You've been up in a lot of games this year, had a chance to really win and be 4-1 right now. So, part of the blame is definitely the situation he's in and that he's inherited. But do you feel like the reason for the second half struggles in games this year, and maybe even dating back to last year once Bo got hurt, is that you exhaust all that you're going to do because you're so limited offensively this year? Robbie Ashford, like you said, meant to be, a changeup, an off-speed pitch to
Yeah.
a TJ Finley. There's only so much he can do. There's only so many plays you can run. You saw the guy get the interception at the end of the game last year because he said they'd run the same play. That was the sixth time they'd run it, and he knew it was coming, had a chance to be more aggressive. So you really exhaust all that you're able to do because you're so limited in what you can do in the intermediate and downfield passing game. Do you think that could be contributing to that second half woes?
I think it's possible. I think it's feasible. On the flip side of that, I would say I don't really think Auburn was in a position in many games last year to not dump everything that they had in the first half. I mean, Jarrett will tell you just like I did, I've run a play more than 6 times in a game, and I've run a play more than 6 times in a game that worked and worked well. So,
yep, no doubt.
You don't have to throw it the 6th time. I mean, if the coverage changes and is there, then the 6th time you tuck it and run or you throw it away. I can remember running inside zone against certain teams my senior year just over and over and over and over because they couldn't stop it.
Sure.
I can remember beating Georgia in '99 when Ben set the school passing record. I mean, we just made a damn 90 check and slid the protection and threw fades the whole game. I know we ran it more than 6 times, and we scored 4 or 5 touchdowns on it. So it's just I don't really believe in the whole, you got to save certain plays for the second half. Now, what I do think is, and there are certain schools like Texas A&M's kind of going through this right now. I do think you alter the presentation of what you do. So, if you want to run counter and you run it out of 12 with 2 tight ends, like in a single back, and it works and works and works, like, okay, well, you probably want to throw some motion on it, or, you play action off of it a little bit, or, you run it into trips, not in 2 tights, or you motion your tight ends back in, whatever. You change the presentation of how you do it, but I don't think that means you need to come out in the second half and say, okay, here's our new playbook since what we were doing in the first half was working. Like that can't be it. You adjust based on the adjustments that you get from the defense. So, I don't like I've always been in the mindset of if what we're doing is working, like they have to adjust, not us. And then when they do, we'll adjust to that. It's all a chess match. Mm-hmm. So, but I think towards the end of the year, depth was obviously a problem. Guys were beat up and worn down. And could they have coached some of those games a little bit differently? Absolutely. Could they have called some things that maybe would have been more successful? Yes, for sure. But there's just as much on players as there is coaches a lot of times, and a lot of people don't want to believe that. It all depends on who everybody's mad at the time. If everybody's mad at the players, then it's going to be the players' fault. If they're mad at the coach, it's going to be the coach's fault. So there's usually equal blame to go around when things are not going bad, and that's what a lot of people have a hard time accepting.
Yep. It's funny, having been in a lot of those situations. My last year was 2019 with the team, and you walk away from a lot of games in that year thinking, man, we should have won that game. What could we have done differently? The loss down in Baton Rouge, turned Florida over 4 times in the swamp, walk out of there losing, I guess, by 2 scores. But yeah, it's just as coaches, you ask yourself, what would you have done differently? Did I make enough adjustments? Did I prepare the right way? And then players have just as much on the execution. Did you put them in the right spot? Did they go do it?
Absolutely.
So that's what it boils down to.
It's a tough deal right now, and it's not fun watching it. And I understand why people are frustrated. It frustrates me, but I try to be a realist about as much of it as I can.
We'll see what happens. If anything, it won't be short of entertaining. Okay, what did you think about LSU? They played worse than I expected. I thought they were going to be better than that. They faced some of the same struggles offensively as Auburn does right now. And granted, Jaden Daniels had some receivers drop some balls they probably should have caught and didn't execute, but you saw him not look exactly comfortable being a drop back passer when he had to.
No, I thought Auburn's D-line played well. Now they didn't play the run extremely well, but that's not always on the D-line. That's on linebackers, secondary, and how you're fitting it, different things like that.
Sure.
But I thought they got to and they were problematic. Obviously, he had some big runs. But, LSU is an interesting team right now because I think that was the first game in which they played the same offensive line combination in back-to-back games. You have I just worked in Missouri this past weekend. They're having this deal with Luther Burden where there's all kind of chatter going on. They got a similar deal with Keishawn Booty, who, nobody really knows if he's happy, if he wants to be there, if he is going to be there, what's going on, so that's like a constant question mark. You get John Emery back at tailback, so then they think they got their best tailback back. You get Seven Banks back. Unfortunately, he goes down that Auburn game, but you had him back 2 weeks ago, didn't have him to begin the season. You lose Mason Smith in the opener. Olajare gets banged up. He misses the Southern game and then a little bit of the game the previous week. Ali Gay gets a targeting. He misses the first half against Southern. Like, they haven't had all their guys together to really know what they are. They're playing 2 freshman tackles. They're playing a freshman tight end. I think there's a lot that they're trying to learn about themselves, and especially the first 3 weeks of the season. Like we were talking about extended practice. Everybody's like, is LSU better? Is LSU better? I'm like, I don't really know if they're better. I just think that they had some questions that needed to be answered, and they're starting to figure out who they are, and they're starting to figure out what they needed to do differently. So, yes, they're improving. I'm not saying they're not, but it's more of a, first game, they started Dellinger at center. Then they moved him to guard. They get the new kid in at center. Then they take their left guard, move him to right tackle. Then they go freshman right tackle. So it's like they've had all these different combinations, guys in and out of the lineup on defense. Now Harold Perkins is playing out of his mind, so you got a new linebacker that can help you out. So I just think they're trying to figure it out, honestly. And then the whole Jaden Daniels, do we need to go more tempo? Like, I never thought going into this year that LSU would say we need to be a tempo team. And we talked to Den Brock and Brian Kelly before the Southern game. They both said we have to go tempo. Like, we have to go fast. Like, we have to be that team. You're kind of like, with those backs, in the new quarter, like, what? Okay, like, sure. But that's what he's comfortable doing. So they're going to try to do more of that. So I just think it's been a feeling out process for them. And no, they didn't play as well as I thought they would. But, I think it shows you a lot about Brian Kelly and that staff that they were able to play that way and still find a way to get a win. You take the ball away on the road, your percentages of winning skyrocket. And they did it. So, and Auburn fans will say it was a bad play, bad decision. All right, well, the other team still took the ball away. Whether they caught the interception or picked up the fumble, whatever it was, like, they went out and did it. So, I think it shows you a little bit about what kind of coach Brian Kelly is, that he's been able to make all these changes, make all these adjustments, and it's got him kind of heading in the right direction. Because the thing about LSU is, the biggest difference is they got talent. They got dudes. And they got 2 NFL receivers. They got an NFL offensive lineman. They got an NFL running back. They got an NFL linebacker. They got 2 NFL edge players. They got an NFL D tackle. They got NFL safety. Like, they're everywhere. Like, they got NFL dudes all over the field. And so that's the difference in, we got to figure all this out, as opposed to, we can't figure anything out because there's really nowhere else to turn, because nobody's winning their one-on-ones and nobody's getting open and nobody's, making a block. It's just, nobody's getting a strip sack. Nobody's getting an interception. Like, that's the difference between having guys and not having guys.
Something I was thinking about, Cole, whenever we were just saying all that, and this is part of the stuff that Hayden and I had talked about and wanted to ask you. And, I feel like, Brian Kelly's a great example. First year guy at LSU, obviously has an extremely incredible track record of where he's been in the past and his success and whatnot. But coming into a place like LSU, and LSU and Auburn and, Billy Napier at Florida, like some of these big time schools where there's big time expectations. And, you can obviously, speak on this with Auburn, but okay, when the expectation is so high, what, and you're coming into this new situation, what is that grace period like for these coaches? And obviously Harsin, Gus's last season was what, 20?
20, yeah.
20. So, Harsin, this is his second year. And obviously I'm kind of driving this more towards Auburn, but, how long is that grace period? Because you're establishing a new culture. You're establishing, new coordinators, new recruiting, way, just how to do everything within recruiting. And obviously NIL is now a part of this. And, with these schools where there's such big expectations, at what point do you say, okay, like, let's give them more time. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of them. Like, I don't know, like, and I don't know the answer. I'm obviously not in the administration or anything, but I feel like with some of these schools, I mean, it's just like the NFL. I mean, you get head coaches that come into new situations, and um, you know, Zach Taylor at Cincinnati is a great example. You know, comes into a terrible situation in Cincy, and they go to the Super Bowl last year, and he's been there for, you know, not that long. And so there's just so many components that obviously come into success. But, you know, as a big school, at a big school like Auburn, Florida, LSU, what does that timeline look like, you think?
And now he's 2-2, and people are pissed off. And he was in the Super Bowl last year. Like,
Right.
that's what's crazy. So
Right.
I don't think that there's a general answer to that. I think that that's where leadership comes in, and I think that's where Auburn has a real issue right now. You know, the people who want the decision to be made to, you know, terminate Bryan Harsin, who actually makes that decision? You're going to put that on an interim AD and Rich McGlynn, a guy who I don't even know if he wants to be the athletic director anymore. Maybe he does,
Right.
maybe he doesn't. I don't know. And then you have a president that's only been in for a couple of months, and now he's supposed to come in and start making these decisions that are going to impact, you know, some of the most important things that happen on an annual basis at that university.
Right.
So there are a lot of massive decisions, and as we all know, there are people behind the scenes that have a lot of influence and make a lot of decisions and do a lot of things, and they'll have their say, which is fine. But I think where we are now, and I'll clarify that everything that I've said, don't get me wrong, there is part of the expectation that has not been met, no matter how little time there's been, no matter how many struggles
No
behind
doubt.
the scenes there have been.
No doubt.
Recruiting is not where it needs to be. And then some of the stuff in game has been questionable at best, and not a lot, but some. So, yeah, it's fair to say this is not where it needs to be, or this is not the way that we want it, or the way that we expected it to be. But the thing that I think separates this particular situation is that there were so many people checked out from the beginning. You know, this was an Alan Green hire with the previous president, and a lot of people that have a lot of power did not like that from the get-go. And then some other people who didn't like that hire this offseason went further to try to make sure that he did not continue as the head football coach. So, you know, all that being said, this is a little bit more of a complicated situation. Do I think if all of the exterior things were not happening, I mean, let's look back at it. Before the season, what were the realistic expectations for this team? Like, I thought 7, maybe 8, and I thought 8 would have been an amazing year. So I mean,
8 would be, yeah.
it's not like it's way far off from where a lot of people thought it was going to be.
Right.
Now, I also thought they had a chance to be 5-0 after these 5 home games that they just played, because I didn't expect Penn State to run counters 77 times and it not be stopped. And, you know, I didn't expect 4 turnovers against LSU. So, you know, things happen. But I think we're to the point now, Jarrett, where it's just it doesn't even matter about a grace period. It doesn't even matter about how long should it be. It's almost just it's this weird waiting period now of when is the person who does have the most power, the most leadership, the most stroke going to make that decision and say, yeah, you know what,
Right.
enough's enough. I don't know. I mean, and the reason that I get defensive sometimes is I was on a team that fired the coach in midseason, and I know how
Yeah.
miserable that was.
Oh, sure.
It was miserable on the rest of the staff. It was miserable on us. I was a young player. There were guys that were trying to go to the league. There were guys that needed to be developed. I was one of them. And I'm not blaming any individual, but what a lot of folks don't understand about that is when a coach is fired midseason, the staff is immediately looking for their next job. And they should, because, like, yes, they're getting paid to work that job right then and right there. But you know good and well your security after that season is about 0. So
Right.
you got to try to have something lined up, especially you got a wife and kids. Like, you got to take care of them. So you're
No
not
doubt.
on the practice field as much. You don't meet as much. You're not watching as much film. You're not getting as much one-on-one coaching. You're not getting as much technique and fundamental time. So your development that was going here is now probably at best like flatlining, or maybe even going down to a certain extent, because you're just not getting the time that you need. So I'm never a fan of the in-season fire. I never will be. But I mean, you look at Carl Durrell, like, yeah, they're 0-5. They've been outscored like 382 to 67 or something. Like, you could look at that deal and say, okay, enough's enough. It probably should have happened. Like Scott Frost at Nebraska, you can sit there and try to quantify close losses, but there obviously have been no good wins in multiple seasons. So, okay, this probably needs to take place. But you also had Mickey Joseph to hand it over to, a guy who was more than capable. So, like the Paul Chris thing,
Yeah.
I mean, this is a dude that's working his dream job, that's done amazing things for that program. And I mean, are they having a shit year? Yeah, they are. But the guy's done a lot of great things for that program. And it's like we take those things, we completely throw them out, and we say, we're only judging your entire tenure based on 5 weeks. And that's enough to say, we're moving on, you're out. So it's different in every situation. But I think the hard part with that, with what you asked, Jarrett, is that in this situation, there are so many people that just think it's over and don't think anything matters. And the really sad part is that they want it to be over, and they don't know what that's like. And they're not saying that with any care in the world about any of the kids. That's just them. Their personal feelings are, I don't like this guy. I don't like how this is going. Let's move on to the next thing. Like, this is not a Jay-Z song, on to the next. Like, this is real life for a lot of people. And it's going to be miserable for a long time for those people. And people throw these things out just thinking, well, it'll make me happy, so I think that's what they should do. Therefore, I'm going to go voice that. And has no idea the amount of people that touches and that impacts because they've never been in that situation.
I'm probably guilty of that a little bit more just because, I don't know. When I was at Auburn, I thought it was a sinking ship, and it was, and I was just ready to get it over with. And it's tough to marry those two things because you're right. It does impact the kids. So many of my friends that grew up as coaches' kids, hate the coaching carousel this time of year. Like Taylor Searles tweeted me today because she responded to something I said about the coaching carousel. And she was like, she texted me, she's like, I hate it when you talk about this because you don't know what it's like growing up as a coach's kid. It was all in good fun. And
I had about
her and I going back at each other.
I had about a 20-minute conversation with her dad before the game, and he's been
Love
through it.
Stacey.
He's lived it, and it's tough on a lot of people, but everyone will discount that because they make a lot of money.
Right.
Doesn't matter if they got to put their kids in a different school system or sell their house and buy a new house, or they got a baby on the way, and the dad might have to go work another job, and the wife and the kid have to stay home. I mean, it's just nobody cares about any of that stuff. Or the player who is getting really close and he's about to start playing, and his position coach gets fired too, and the analyst has to come in and be his position coach for the rest of the year. Like, nobody cares about that guy. It's just, I want what I want, so therefore, let's make it happen.
But as administration, you have a role to play in that that this is going to impact recruiting. And if they've made the decision to go ahead and move on from Bryan Harsin, well, then you have to decide, well, when's the most optimal time to do that? And do we think that having an interim head coach, which will have a lot of downside, could also bring positives in the fact that, if it's a dynamic guy, I don't know, one example, which is probably not the rule, but more of an anomaly, is Dabo Swinney at Clemson. And that was the end of the spectrum. But maybe you bring someone who's a positive guy, good leader who can start to change things around and turn things in the intermediary. So those are two. You've got to weigh the pros and cons of both of those things. And I'm sure they're fighting that battle right now, maybe not in such objective terms, but they're fighting it some way.
Well, look at Brent Key. He just took Georgia Tech up to beat Pittsburgh. I mean,
that's right.
Interim coach. I mean, that's a hell of a win for him. So, I mean, listen, I understand from an administrative standpoint, and that's another spot that we're in that's really different right now. The two best examples that I have of this are Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Joe Moorhead went through a couple of quarterbacks. They were having a good year. Still didn't have a bad year. I think they won 7 games that year, and he played 3 quarterbacks. And, he kind of fought through it, and they were just like, you know what, we're pulling the ripcord. But they probably knew they could go get a big name, big character, high energy, excite the fans guy, Mike Leach, so they did it. Same thing with Ole Miss. I mean, Matt Luke had that thing going. Like, all those recruits that Lane did with the first 2 years, Matt Luke and that staff brought all those guys in. And they had John Rice Plumlee rush for 1,000 yards. Like, they were competitive. They had Rich Rod in there. They had Mike McIntyre in there. Like, I thought at that point in time, they had the best coordinator pairing in the SEC. And they were recruiting at a high level. They were coming off probation. I mean, his last year, they just got back to 85 scholarships the fall before they went into that year. And you hire him, but you bring in Lane Kiffin, somebody who everybody pees their pants about, and all of a sudden now the fans are all happy. So I said that in that it's not just recruiting anymore. It's satisfying your fan base. And this is weird to say, but it's not even wins and losses. It's like satisfying the fans with the name. And I talked to multiple ADs about those two hires, and they all basically said, you've got to make your fans happy because they're buying tickets and they're buying suites, and they're the ones that are probably spending a lot of the advertising dollars. And if the fans aren't into it, then you're getting hurt in a lot of other ways. Now, recruiting is real, and where I think Auburn's going to have some advantages down the road is the people behind the NIL situation finally had that thing going in the right direction. It's going to be right it's not just going to be right, it's going to be really right really soon. So that's going to be a big advantage. And obviously you've got the new football facility that's going to open, and you've got a place where it's proven that you can go in and win. You can go in and win in a short period of time. So I'm kind of with you in where you're going. Like, if you know you're going to do it, I kind of don't really know what you're waiting for. As much as I hate it to happen in the middle of the season, this process of dragging it out is probably worse on everybody, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And with the early signing period, you need to get a jump to save as much as your recruiting class as humanly possible. And that's not going to be a lot of time. But if you get an elite branded coach that can go out and make some of those splash gets through recruiting, be it the portal now or high school kids, maybe you get that head start, and maybe that's why you do it. I don't – there's a lot of things to take into consideration. But like I said before, that's what makes this feel very different, is that there are so many people that say it's done, it's over. And as you stated, it just makes you wonder, what are you waiting for? Like, what's the roadblock that we have to finally get to where we say, okay, now we're going to crash and this thing's going to happen? And I don't know.
There's a lot of variables at play.
None of us have that answer.
I don't think anyone does. You talked about, those are two great examples of Ole Miss and Mississippi State. And I said this last week. I kind of did a breakdown of, the end of my time at Auburn, Bryan Harsin coming in, everything that's happened. And I said, when you go into a coaching rebuild that really had to happen at Auburn, the first guy through the wall is always going to get the bloodiest. And like you talked about with Matt Luke, I mean, they had it going. And he didn't get over the hump enough to really give the fan base faith. And so Lane Kiffin inherited so much more than Matt Luke probably had at the time. And I think probably the next guy, not a guarantee, but probably the next guy after Harsin, if that's what happens, will probably have a little bit better state of a college football team than he had the luxury of walking into. And I think that happens pretty regularly when you go through a rebuild like that. It just takes 1 to 2 guys of getting the program over the hump to make it where you can win games comfortably and not have to fight for your freaking life and pull every single trick you've got in the book. And I meant to say this earlier, but how often do coaches get tricky when they don't have to?
Yeah.
They'd like to never have to do that, ever. And so if you see them doing that, there's probably a reason for it. It's probably because at practice all week, we can't execute the stuff that we'd like to, so we've got to get outside the box.
It's fair.
So this is we're over an hour now, and I know you got to get to bed and stuff, and I know Jarrett's got stuff to do. He's got a baby girl, so we can wrap this up soon. Last question I have, man.
Yes, we do.
I can't wait to see that in Arrowhead. Last question I'll have. I think the East is better than the West here. I really don't think it's close. When was the last time that we could probably say that?
I think the last time you could even have a real debate about it had to be, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, maybe more. I can't even remember it, to be honest with you.
I really don't. What was the landscape of the like?
So I mean, but the other part of that I'll say is, I think Georgia's really good, but I think we found out this weekend, and we had a long conversation about it in our production meeting before the game, and I tried to explain to our guys, I said, and Jordan agreed with me. I said, I just don't see this like a movable object. I don't see this indestructible force like I did last year. And it's not just that it was Georgia last year and it's Georgia this year. It's the two teams. It's what they looked like. You take the uniforms, the logo out of it. It's what they looked like last year and what they look like this year. So, I mean, they're gettable. Tennessee's offense is fantastic. They're fun to watch. They're great. And how about just a total sidebar in a coaching situation? Like, you've got like the 4th or 5th or 6th option there that comes in an emergency situation, and the fans are like, we're going to quit, just completely quit. We give up. And the dude wins 7, and now he's got him in the top 10. And it's rolling and it's time to get an extension. Like, that's how crazy all of this whole
Insane.
thing is right
No
now.
doubt.
I
Right.
think Tennessee's great. I think Kentucky's still a really good football team. They got some offensive line problems, but I'll say this: I think Kentucky is more explosive at receiver collectively than they've been in the history of their program ever. And they've
Wow.
had they had Randall Cobb, they had Wandale Robinson, they had Lynn Bowden, but they got 3 guys right now that have juice that can go. And I don't think I've ever said that about a Kentucky football team. You getting Chris Rodriguez back is going to be big. They got some young D linemen that are helping out. I think they have a chance to keep growing. They have a ton of talent at quarterback, a guy who's tough, a gamer. And Scringillo is showing that he can call plays. They're going to be fine. They're going to be okay. That was a tough loss Saturday, but like I told you before, I think LSU is just kind of slowly climbing, and I think they might be a pretty good team by the end of the year. I think Ole Miss right now has the most unique, creative run game in college football, and it's not because Judkins is a stud. It's not because Zach Evans is a stud. Like, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and once again, the presentation of how they handle their run game it's wild. It's so cool. I love watching it. It's fun to watch. And I think they actually might be like last year. Everybody's like, "Oh, they're so much better on defense." They went from 122 to like 96. So whatever. Like, I think they might be pretty real on defense this year. I mean, they got safety that can get it. They got some edge rushers. They have an interior defensive line presence. They actually might really be different on defense this year. So I think they're pretty good. I think Mississippi State's really good, but they're always going to be like an asterisk team. They're always going to be like semi-flawed just because there's going to be times when the air raid just doesn't work. Like, it's going to run into walls. It's kind of like Heupel's offense. And because his moves faster, people don't see that as much. But trust me, that thing hits walls. We had their bowl game against Purdue, and it was like touchdown, explosive, touchdown, 3 and out, 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 explosive, touchdown, explosive, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Like, that thing goes away, but it's so fast. I mean, and Jerry, you probably saw that at Baylor some, where like you came off a game thinking, man, we just threw for 450. Like, we were moving the ball, but like, how in the hell did we have 8 3 and outs? Like, collectively, it actually wasn't all pretty, but it was so explosive and so fast at times, everybody just thought the whole thing was amazing. So, like, that thing will hit a wall and get jammed up for a little while, but they can put points up in a hurry, so people kind of forget that part. I still am not sold on their defense. I think Florida can be dangerous because I think Anthony Richardson is just that talented. And I love Billy and what they do offensively. I think it's a good fit for him. Like, they're going to make it work in certain ways. South Carolina's kind of letting me down. Vanderbilt's not a great football team. Missouri is just not a great football team, but they're playing hard. They're scratching and fighting. I think Eli's got a good system. He's got good pieces.
Fighting.
He's got good pieces. He just doesn't have enough pieces right now. So I don't know, man. I think it's really close. A&M and Auburn in the West are kind of the teams that you're like, man, just kind of don't really like what you see. But I would say in the East, it's kind of like Missouri Vandy. Don't really like what you see all the time. So I don't know. I guess it's like to me, it comes down to like your number one team is going to probably be even. Your number 2 team is probably going to lean the East right now, but I think your 3, 4, 5 is going to lean the West. So I think for the first time in a long time, the East may be a little more top heavy, but I still think the West is a little bit deeper with quality teams because, Arkansas has played a brutal schedule, and they were in it with Alabama, and they just kind of lost their way. I still think they're a good football team. They got good players. I think Ole Miss is a good football team, and I think LSU is going to continue to grow, and obviously Alabama's elite. So I don't know, man. I'd probably still lean West top to bottom as far as just depth of teams. Here's how I look at it. Who would you not want to play? I think there are more teams in the West that I would not want to play right now than there are in the East.
That's fair. I think
right now or in a month, because I feel like LSU especially and A&M, I don't know. I just keep wondering how A&M doesn't figure it out. Like, thought for sure they would look a little bit better with Max Johnson. They've been recruiting so well. They have quality players that a lot of schools like Auburn do not have the luxury of having. I just don't know how they don't put a better product on the field. It's mind-blowing.
Presentation. It's an easy fix.
Jimbo ain't changed a thing, huh? I'm headed to Knoxville to see Tennessee play Kentucky here in a few weeks. I guess that's what, end of October, and I'm fired up. Go see some of those guys. Did you ever meet Billy High? He used to be like director of recruiting at Auburn, was a GM at North Carolina in
I know who he is. Yeah, I don't know him very well,
yes.
but I know who he is. Yeah.
So he and I used to work together at Auburn, and so he's there. Garner's there, and a few other guys that have gone to Tennessee. So I'm excited to go see them.
They have a really good staff, man. Like I like Tim Banks a lot. I think he's a great dude. Josh has warmed up to us a lot. I think he was kind of guarded when he first took over, but he's been good. Golish is great. Like we love sitting down with him. He's fantastic. So I think, and I love Glenn Ellerby, their offensive line coach. Like I think he's fantastic. So they have a really good staff there at Tennessee.
Kelsey Pope, Sylacauga guy. Shout out to Sylacauga.
Absolutely. Yep. They got a good group there, and they finally got, it's kind of like what we talked a little bit about at Auburn. Like they finally got some people out of the way that needed to get out of the way, and it helped ease some things up. My new theory with Auburn moving forward is, if this thing does happen sometime in the near future, I would lean into it. I wouldn't even ask people to get out of the way. I would lean into it and say the NIL's got to be right. If that's right, you guys do whatever you want, have whoever you want, but make that part right, and the rest will figure itself out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's where we are in college football. So.
Yeah, that's very true.
Money talks, I guess. That's how it is.
That's what Jarrett always said.
Cool. Jarrett. We had Brett Whiteside on a couple weeks ago and talked NIL and On to Victory, which was such a fascinating conversation because he got to talk the football part and the NIL part. And Jarrett asked how much he would have been worth to On to Victory, if we could go back and do it all over again. And Brett said a very political answer.
That's not how I worded that.
He said, Jarrett, you're priceless.
That's absolutely false. I did not say.
What did you say? What did you say?
No, I just said if NIL existed back whenever I played, what would that have potentially looked like?
You said how much money would there have been out there for me? That's what you said.
I didn't say how much money am I worth. I didn't say that. I didn't say it like that.
Okay, I maybe didn't make it sound as douchey, or it wasn't as douchey as I made it sound right there, but it wasn't far away.
But it's complicated. Like how many schools need a quarterback at that moment? I mean, it wouldn't even be about Jarrett and Auburn. It's like if Auburn and Tennessee and Texas and Nebraska all needed a quarterback that fit what his skill set was, like you go from being worth 250 to 800 in a minute to maybe being worth 1.5 real quick, because that's the position that everybody is overbidding for. Obviously, we've heard the stories about the high school guys. So everyone's going way overboard just to try to get a guy in that can complete some passes. The real answer to that is, whatever, X, 500,000 without Kerryon Johnson, and probably 100,000 or $1 million without Kerryon Johnson. I think I got that backwards. Like 500 without Kerryon and like 1.5 with Kerryon is what Stidham would have been worth back in the day.
Right. A definite compliment to Jarrett.
A compliment to Kerryon. Let's be real.
I'll tell you that Oklahoma would have opened the bank for him right now with what they're running. Tennessee would have opened the bank for him for what they're running. Like, I mean, he'd have had. If it was right now, there'd be some heavy bidding going on.
There'd be some suitors for sure. All right, well, good deal. It's getting late, guys.
Maybe.
Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that.
You can pick one sponsor in the Auburn-Opelika area. Local sponsor. Who is it?
Now or then?
No. Oh, good question. Let's go then. Let's go back then.
Then I was a dummy, so it would have probably been like Bodega back then. Now I'm a little bit smarter. So here's what I'm waiting for kids to get into is real estate.
Yeah.
If I was a high profile kid right now, I would say, no, I want a condo downtown and I want it in my name and I want to own it. I don't want to lease it. I don't want to have it for 3 months. I want it to be mine. And that would be my demand because I have that the rest of my life. Like
Right.
I own it, and that would, I mean, some of these kids are going to start getting really smart, and they're going to say, I don't want 50 grand, but I do want 500 shares of Apple, or I don't I don't want a $25,000 Nike deal, but I do want 25,000 shares of Nike. And they're going to be like, oh, okay, this is different. Like, how do we make this work?
No doubt.
Yeah. Some kids are going to start getting smart, and it's not all going to be about, let me drive a free Lamborghini for 6 months. Like, that's cool. But some of these kids are going to smarten up and be like, no, I want something that's going to help me for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. Brett was saying that you get a mix of guys that want to do it themselves, guys that bring in marketing people. Like I think Jarrett said, Bryce Young's you got to have the same like marketing guy or firm or something like that. And you're going to start to see, like you said, a trend of guys getting smarter, making wiser decisions that set them up long term, which is a great thing, which is an incredible thing.
Yep.
Yeah. It's what they should be doing.
Absolutely.
True.
But
Good
back
stuff.
then, I would have taken the damn Z71 and done about a million Instagram posts if you wanted me to. Like,
no question.
give me a bar tab and a pickup, and I'd have done whatever you want. I'd have done an appearance 3 times a week if you wanted me to.
That's great.
All right, fellas. Cole, it's been great having you, man. Insightful as always. Jarrett,
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here. Good luck against Kansas City on Monday. We'll be supporting you and the Raiders as you walk into a daunting Arrowhead.
Thank you for telling the other hosts thanks for being on the podcast that he runs. I really appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Well,
Cole, we really do appreciate you coming on, dude.
No. I tell
McElroy that every day. Thanks for showing up.
And it's hard. GMAC actually shows up. It's hard to get Jarrett and our other host, who's also named Cole, to get on this show. Like last week I recorded solo, which is fine. So Jarrett, don't act like you're just here every week and there's never any variation in your showing up.
Okay.
Fair or not fair? Fair or not fair?
I mean, fair. That's fair. That's fair.
You go live where Jarrett lives.
All right, fellas.
There's not other things going on.
Thank you so much.
No, I enjoyed
really
it, guys.
it.
Anything for you, and let's do it again.
Absolutely.
Sounds good, brother.
Good luck this weekend calling the game in Lexington.
I appreciate it, man.
All right, brother.
All right.
Good.
War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Or damn.
And we're good.